Hi everyone. Welcome to OILS 513, Learning Module 5. Knowledge management is the field of inquiry that seeks to understand how organizations such as businesses, government agencies, and schools create, document, and distribute work-related information to the people within these organizations who need it. A particular interest of the knowledge management field is informal and undocumented information. For example, how are problem solutions, skills, or intuitive insights that employees gain as they work over time in their jobs articulated and transmitted between coworkers? Knowledge management researchers also design systems that try to capture this expertise that employees have and codify it or organize it so it can be shared throughout an organization over time. In this learning module, we'll review some of the key concepts and tools that knowledge management brings to the workplace to help organizations use more information more effectively. This is Kevin Comerford, and you are listening to the mellow sounds of lecture number 5 for OILS 513. In this learning module, we cover the field of knowledge management. Like so many contemporary management trends and organizational studies, knowledge management is a field that developed as much as a solution looking for a problem to solve as anything else. So let's start the lecture by reviewing a bit of the history of KM, as it is called in the industry, even though there isn't that much history to cover since this is such a new field of inquiry. But in the late 1980s and early 1990s, public access to online services such as CompuServe and then later access to the internet opened new opportunities for large organizations in terms of networked sharing of business information and new collaborative work models. In 1989, IBM released Lotus Notes, a hugely popular collaboration software platform that fostered the development of knowledge management practices as we know them today. Thus, information technology really formed the original basis of knowledge management. It is said that around 1991, the McKinsey Corporation was the first organization to actually coin the term knowledge management. And then just a couple of years later, the business consulting firm Ernst & Young organized the first knowledge management conference for management consulting professionals. So knowledge management really began to develop as a formal discipline due to the enthusiasm of management consultants, if you can believe that, who saw that sharing organizational information through the use of information technology was key to business success and productivity in the future. Today, knowledge management is recognized as a field of research and practice within the discipline of information science. Now, if you look on the internet, there are innumerable knowledge management consulting firms and information technology companies who produce knowledge management type software applications. There are also knowledge management professional organizations and university faculty who specialize in researching and publishing about knowledge management, either from the business school perspective or the information science perspective. Now, this slide was adapted from a popular IBM knowledge management matrix. The matrix was developed in the early 1990s, and thus the technology and the terms were somewhat outdated, so I've made a few updates to it. But the value of this matrix is to show how knowledge management resources can include things like data and information technology solutions, interpersonal, interactive, people-based services. So you'll see as you look across this matrix that we have everything from staffed information desks, hierarchically organized website directories, mentorship programs, communication and collaboration systems, data warehouses, subscription news, RSS feeds, push information services, and social interaction and collaboration workspaces. So really all of these types of programs and services put together form what knowledge management has to offer the large organization. A key feature of knowledge management theory is that organizational knowledge can be defined into three main categories: explicit knowledge, implicit knowledge, and tacit knowledge. As mentioned in your learning module introduction, a lot of information that workers receive is formally documented and distributed at work. This type of knowledge or information is explicit knowledge. However, much information that is passed within an organization at all levels, really from the lowest level of job to the highest executive levels, is passed very informally and is often undocumented, or at least not documented in a way that is worth saving and distributing. This type of information is called implicit knowledge, and a major goal of knowledge management research is to find ways to get at this kind of organizational information. The third type of knowledge is much harder to define, but it's called tacit knowledge. Tacit knowledge can comprise a variety of different, very sophisticated, highly complex, kind of intuitive as well as skilled types of knowledge. On one hand, like I said, it can be extremely technical in nature, and only very highly skilled workers at an organization tend to understand the boundaries of tacit knowledge. It can also be, on the other hand, sophisticated knowledge about social interactions within an organization and particular relationships between people at different levels within organization. So while they are difficult to define, there are many types of implicit and tacit knowledge and information that flow through an organization. Next, let's review the most major types of knowledge management tools and practices that are currently used in large organizations. Some knowledge management tools are not necessarily bound to technology. The first one on the list here is a documentation project. And these really don't require anything more than a word processor to complete, as documentation is simply the analysis of business processes and procedures, and then the systematic documentation of them, which tends to wind up being a free-flowing document as is produced by a word processing application. However, most organizations find they are always running behind on producing useful policy and procedural documentation for their employees. And often documenting mundane business processes takes a fierce effort of will by workers and managers at all levels. However, the payoff for the organization of having complete and correct and up-to-date documentation on their policies and procedures is undeniable. Often it's a legal requirement because of safety and health and other laws. Now, this policy and procedure documentation should be properly indexed and organized so it can be found easily in an employee manual or on an intranet website for the organization. Oops. This is the function of ontology and taxonomy projects, the second item on the list, where specific controlled vocabulary terms are used to describe the organizational environment and business operations. The information portal, third item, can be of any type of website where organization, documentation, and knowledge bases are located for access by all employees. Very frequently in the private sector, Microsoft SharePoint is a favorite solution for this, although there are many different kinds of web server solutions to choose from. For example, later in this course, we'll be working on a Drupal content management system, which can serve equally well as a portal solution for a large organization. Now, the fourth item on the list, the knowledge base, is really the most important facet of knowledge management. And we're going to spend some time on the rest of the lecture on this. The knowledge base is a database where employees can contribute their experience and insight into solving business problems that are mostly not ever recorded in official company documentation. We'll talk more about that in just a moment. Two other types of knowledge management tools include expertise locators. These are also called experts bureaus. And the use of the term bureau goes back to the old idea of a speaker's bureau, which was a list of people who are available to speak to the public on various topics for an organization. Expertise locators are essentially rosters of known experts in a particular subject that is germane to organizational function. In very large organizations like, say, Microsoft Corporation, or even here at UNM, expertise locators are complex software applications that bring people together who need information and help. The UNM Office for the Vice President of Research has their own expertise locator service called Research Match that you can look at on the web, and I included the URL here. And this was just launched within the last year, I believe. And the second category on this slide, communities of practice. These are formal committees or social groups of experts who meet regularly to solve specific problems or provide consulting services within or between organizations. This type of consulting can be technical in nature or more practice-oriented. For example, there is a community of practice that I was actually involved in testing their original website called Ethics Share, where issues of medical ethics are discussed online. And the URL is there for you to look at that as well. Also, if you've heard of a management program from the 1980s or 90s called Total Quality Management, or TQM, this management practice made extensive use of communities of practice called, and they're under TQM, these are called quality circles. And lastly, I wanted to mention data warehouses and data mining systems. These are actually disciplines unto themselves, and we will probably get to talk a little bit more about those separately in another lecture. But data warehouses provide a unique opportunity for large organizations to perform research on themselves in order to develop different hypotheses about how to improve their products and services. How to deal with everything from advertising and customer support to product development and business operations. Corporations, government agencies, as well as universities have developed data warehouses to keep historical information about all aspects of their organizational operations. In fact, UNM has a data warehousing program, and they have three different emphases in the warehousing system. One for historical student data, historical financial data for the university, and historical research project data. And that's being developed through the Provost's Office of Institutional Analytics. And again, the URL is there if you want to go look at the data warehouse page for UNM. So the utility of having a lot of historic data, longitudinal data, that you can leverage to analyzing your business operations is certainly a type of implicit knowledge that institutions can gain through these types of technology solutions. Let's talk for a moment about taxonomies and ontologies, which, in the context of knowledge management, are structured methods for describing the characteristics and functions of an organization. Taxonomic classification was originally conceived in the sciences and is used even today, and very much so today, to help scientists understand the organization of biological order on our planet. Much later in history, scholars in general began developing keyword classification systems to organize knowledge. For example, in the 18th century, Thomas Jefferson organized his personal library at Monticello using a classification scheme developed by Francis Bacon. And it was Bacon's universal classification of knowledge. So Jefferson's library was organized into three main classes of history, philosophy, and literature, which at that time were thought to be broad enough categories to contain the whole universe of human knowledge. It wasn't until the 19th and 20th centuries that librarians and information professionals began developing complex taxonomic or classification schemes. Individuals that you have possibly heard of, such as Melville Dewey Decimal System, Charles Cutter, who invented the bibliographic classification, and S.R. Ranganathan, the great Indian information scientist who developed faceted classification, were pioneers in the field of universal taxonomic classification. And on a side note, you'll sometimes see the term ontology used in both business and information science literature. In rough terms, an ontology is a collection of separate taxonomies that are somehow related, and they work together to provide a more universal description of an organization or a subject class. So, for example, the Getty Art and Architecture Thesaurus is a great example of a contemporary ontological system. The Art and Architecture Thesaurus is actually a community of many different thesauri used to describe characteristics of art objects, such as paintings and sculptures, and include individual taxonomies to describe architecture, physical locations, physical characteristics and materials of art objects, style, color, and cultures of origin of specifically art objects. So an ontology has a very broad scope for describing many different parts of a complex subject, whereas a taxonomy is really intended to be one sort of linear tree that describes one subject from very broad terms at the top to very narrow specific terms at the bottom. So for our purposes, business taxonomies tend to be much less exciting than the Art and Architecture Thesaurus and much more mundane. This is an example of a simple county government taxonomy that's used to organize that county's website. So you can see that we have main classes, assessor, commissioners, coroner, clerk, and recorder. And then we have subdivisions under clerk and recorder and sub-subdivisions under recording. So all of these terms, when they are used in a standardized way and you don't change the terms form or content, these controlled vocabulary terms form a taxonomy. Now let's move on and take a look at knowledge bases, which are databases used to collect informal, implicit information that skilled employees learn as they become highly effective performers at their work. The knowledge base is generally conceived of as a software application that is accessible to all employees in an organization through the web or through a desktop client. However, the knowledge base itself could be implemented in any form, including paper notebooks if you wanted to, as long as a couple of conditions exist. The first is that all employees have to have, in an organization, have to have the capability to refer to the knowledge base in one form or another, and that all employees have the ability to contribute to the knowledge base when they discover solutions to problems or more effective methods of accomplishing tasks. And a knowledge base, it's kind of important to note, is often used to augment formal documentation. So if you are a new person on a job and I give you a procedure guide on how to enter a record into a database, if there are special tricks and techniques that somebody who's entered a lot of records into that database have learned and put into the knowledge base, then we can cross-reference the formal procedure guide and the applicable knowledge base records so that somebody who is new on the job and just being trained has access to all of these resources as they start to do their work. Knowledge bases are most effective when they are relatively simple in design and very easy to use, and then employees and workers who are contributing to it can create records very quickly in the knowledge base, and then can search and retrieve records very quickly to pull out of the knowledge base. Thus, a knowledge base can be designed and implemented as a tool for any kind of organization in a pretty short period of time. However, even though the technology component of building a knowledge base is easy, knowledge bases don't become an accepted resource within an organization until many employees contribute their insights into it, thus building it up as a database of experience and insights. And also employees begin to using it and trying to get information out of it and seeing it as a useful resource to help them in their work. Knowledge bases, again, though easy to implement, require a firm and ongoing commitment from an organization's management. As the knowledge base is really a living document, it has to be edited continually and moderated on an ongoing basis. Management also needs to encourage and prod employees to make use of the resource and continually remind them to use it. Often it's when a knowledge base is first implemented in an organization, offering incentives to employees to contribute to it and to use it is a good way to gain acceptance. So without an organized knowledge base adoption campaign, employees will often ignore this resource. And even if they don't, it can often take several years before the knowledge base becomes really ingrained in an organization's culture as a useful resource. This slide shows an example of the types of freely structured information that a knowledge base would contain or support. As you can see, the data architecture of a knowledge base does not need to be very complex to be useful. And let's look at an actual knowledge base screenshot. This is a very rough and ready knowledge base data entry form I designed to be used in the UNM College of Arts and Sciences Dean's office, where my wife works. And this is actually a problem that she encounters on a daily basis during the beginning of every long semester. So the knowledge base contains information about specific business problems that routinely occur in the office and offers key solutions to them. The form itself includes fields to describe the problems and their solutions, and also has keyword and tag fields to make it easier for both to browse easier to both browse for or search for this information. It also contains contact information for the person who created the record, so that if you need more information or want more advice on the problem, you can find them and contact them. And dates of creation and update to tell us how old the solution is. The knowledge base design is simple enough to search and read that it can help both staff and student workers in this case. There's a lot of student workers in the various dean's office administrative departments. And as illustrated by this particular knowledge base record, the knowledge base contains information not necessarily appropriate for official office policy and procedure documents. So the components of the record here are very simple. We have a title that describes what the problem is, and then we have a long form problem description, and then a solution description area. We have keywords. Keywords become our taxonomy so that we can help people browse for the solution. And tags are free form keywords that are not controlled, whereas taxonomies always utilize controlled vocabularies. The tag feature allows somebody just to type in a set of keywords that may not be controlled and may not be in the organizational formal taxonomy. Notes field for any additional information, and then the date and created by fields. So I'd like you to pause the lecture here and examine the screenshot for just a moment. As I said, this is a very basic, very rough and ready data entry form. How could this knowledge base form be improved? What additional fields could be added to improve on the information provided in the solution? Would you include additional fields to indicate who the target audience is for the solution? Is it somebody who sits at the front reception desk, or is it somebody who works in the accounting department? Would you include additional fields, the target audience, or sections of the office who are most affected by this problem? Knowledge bases can be powerful tools for collecting important bits of information that managers often overlook. All right, so let's finish up by talking about this week's assignments. I found a really good book that we have the rights for you to download the entire book on the Introduction to Knowledge Management by the CN Foundation. And you're only assigned to read chapters 2, 4, and 6, but it's a fairly short book, and it's really worth reading the entire text. And like I said, you can download the entire thing and keep it as a reference for later use. You have one assignment for this learning module. It's a discussion assignment. I would like each of you to write a 2-paragraph posting about how you might be able to implement some of the knowledge management tools, methods, or practices we've reviewed in the readings and the lecture and the little video that you're going to watch as part of your assigned readings, and how you would implement knowledge management practices at your own place of work or at a workplace with which you are familiar. Or if you would rather, how we might be able to implement knowledge management in some form or fashion that would benefit students or university workers here at UNM. In your posting, please devote 1 paragraph to a discussion about knowledge management practices. So what behaviors at this place of work would you have to change in order for a knowledge management program to be successful? What business or administrative practices would you need to change to accommodate more implicit information exchange between employees? Then in the second paragraph, please talk about a tool or tools you would like to design in order to facilitate a knowledge management solution at your workplace. Would you implement a knowledge base for employees, or an expertise locator, or a community of practice? What knowledge management tools would work most effectively in your type of work environment? Because we've been having network problems and so forth here recently, please write your post using your word processor on your laptop so you can save a copy of your posting and then copy it into the Learn message form. This is just to prevent accidental loss of your writing should you be in the middle of writing your post and then the Learn system suddenly becomes unavailable